Welcome. Today I am joined with Tom Madonna. I had the pleasure of working with Tom during my time at SAP. We had a great program there where you could essentially learn and experience a completely different job. So I got to work under Tom's team as an industry advisor for a while. One of the things that I always loved about you, Tom, is that you bring a tremendous depth of experience across your career, but you're always very simple and straightforward with how do we take all of its depth into something that's practical and executable. I am really excited for our conversation today. You've crossed so many different points in your career from your deep manufacturing background to consulting to industry leadership. And I would just love if we get started, if you could give us a bit of a background of, your experience, your career, and some of the roles that you've held across that.
Sure. So, one, thank you for having me. As far as the career goes, I started in the late 80s. I came out of undergraduate and basically had a MIS degree and got into consulting directly. When I came out of school, I was actually working on Oracle Database 1 and Forms and everything else 0. But did Oracle development and then Oracle application implementations for about 4 or 5 years. And then from there, I left consulting, went into industry, and was in high tech manufacturing for telecom equipment. And we implemented Oracle. It was Oracle version 8, 9, 10, and 11. I left that, went back into consulting. I finished up my master's, went back into consulting, and thought I was going to be doing Oracle practice and Oracle management, and had a bit of a disagreement between the firm and Oracle in regards to acquisition of resources, and the work leadership switched over to SAP, and there I had jumped from that to SAP, and pretty much that was early '90s, and I went through the academy, and then quickly then moved into um, work. And interesting, it's been 30 years or so now with SAP, doing SAP work, working for SAP. I've done over 500 implementations throughout my career across all of our industries, all 26 industry sets. Actually went back and started looking at that, and there's probably about 40 or so sub-industries that are in part of that. I thought I was going to be able to say I implemented everything but HR. Unfortunately, one of my last projects I did before coming into SAP was doing success factors. I had a small little company in Seattle that does software. So 450,000 people were implemented in that system. So it was a little project.
Little project.
But pretty much finished that up, and then I joined SAP about 5.5 years ago as an industry advisor in auto. Auto is probably 10 plus years of my background. Did that for a couple years. The VP role came up, and my boss reached out and said, "Would you like to apply for it?" I did. End up taking the position. And then this past spring, I picked up all of our Latin America industry advisors as we combined the Americas. So
Mhm.
implemented all the products, implemented 500 plus times, have done AMS project, name it, in regard to the work. And I spent a bit of time basically really finding kind of what I like when and doing stuff. And it's really getting, the hands dirty, rolling up sleeves, getting in and having conversation with the customer, talking about what their challenges and opportunities are. And then from there, helping them craft, draft and implement their projects. And it's really at the end of the day when they go live and they turn around and they see the success of that project is really, is what I find gratifying in
Mhm.
regards to the execution. I think the other thing that's gratifying is, throughout that career, I've managed teams of, a dozen to over 2,500 people. But I've had the same philosophy in regards to the management of people. And that is, how do you leave an impression on someone? Because at the end of the day, it's not how much you have. It's the leadership philosophy is really not what you collect. It's not the positions you got. It's not, words you attain. It's not what percentage of salary, you are.
Mhm.
It's really the lasting impression is the individuals that you touch. I found that out very quickly in my career with a couple mentors that really, irrespective of what was going on, irrespective of how bad a day they might have been having, how bad of quarter the might have been, how bad a year it might have been, et cetera, always, would set aside time to have a conversation. And then ultimately giving meaningful, impactful information and listening. And ultimately, that changed my philosophy in leadership to a more of a mentor approach. And that was probably about the time I was light to medium manager in the
Mhm.
firm. And ultimately, overnight, the personality interactions change because people understand that. And so, one of the things besides that list we just talked about in regards to accomplishments, the other accomplishments that I'm probably more proud of is I've had 40 people I've promoted to partner over the year. I've had 100 and some odd people I've promoted to associate partner over the year. I've hired 15, 16, 1700 people. I mean, at one point in time, back at big firm, the other three-letter acronym organization that's blue. I think I was going through and doing interviews 44, 45 weeks of the year. So every
Wow.
Friday I was in the office doing interviews, and it was typically 3, 6, 8, 10 hires per week because the business was growing at that point in time. So those people still come back. I mean, I'll be walking on a showroom floor at a conference. I'll be walking in the airport, and someone will come up to me and say, "Hey, Tom, hey, I work for you at this client on this project. Do you remember me?" It's like, I'm sorry, I don't, but thank you. Appreciate your efforts and thanks for pointing out. If I do remember them, because I remember faces a lot better than I remember names. I'm to the point where I've got that 17 step of exercise before it becomes routine. I'm kind of the same thing with names. Got to say it 15, 16, 17 times before I can actually remember your name. But I guarantee you, I look at a picture and the next day I can actually, point the person out and say, "Hey, that's such and such."
Mhm.
But yeah, it's one of those things. It's gratifying, and you could be three different delays. It's raining. You're going to be in the airport for 24 hours, and someone comes up and does that, and immediately just turns the lights on, turns the sunshine on, and off you go. So
Uh-huh.
I think the thing that I find most interesting, particularly at this stage of my career, is how I've impacted individuals, how I've impacted early talent and growth, how I've impacted managers moving into a bigger role, how I've moved people into management roles, and all the things that come with it. And
Yeah.
not to say that everybody gets along, but a mutual respect and a mutual
Uh-huh.
ability to listen to individuals and then basically work through a consensus to help them in their careers is definitely some of the things that I find most rewarding. But it's been a fun ride.
It's an amazing ride. Being a memorable leader is a tremendous accomplishment to celebrate. You can talk a little bit about how you made that change from consulting into more of the sales advisory arm. You talked a little bit about finding what you like was a part of that change. What are some of the ways that maybe the consulting helped to prepare you to be better on the sales side, or how did you facilitate that transition?
Well, I think one interesting thing is we really didn't hire consultants into this position until I kind of went through it.
Hmm.
And my management team at that point in time started looking and thinking, okay, maybe this isn't the only type of approach because we were really looking for the CIO, CTO, CSIO type of role. Someone who's been in the industry for 15, 20 plus years, has seen, worked, has the scars, has the welts on the back, and can have that conversation with their peer in
Hmm.
regards to their challenges, their opportunities, what go out there to go do. As a consultant, and usually that take that one more step. Usually that person's been in that spot, maybe with that particular company for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, and then they make the move. Well, they know one way of doing it and one way of doing it very well. And if they're connected, they might know a couple of their colleagues within their industry that have helped. But the thing about consulting that was different was the breadth. So I talked about those 500 implementations. It's always going back to the way configuration and implementation happens, irrespective of being the blue product or the red product. It's There's three ways of doing it, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. And the ability for you to take the client through the pluses and minuses of why they do that is definitely imperative in regards to that. And that's no different than I'm doing today within uh, the sales advisory role that we have. I think the difference is that over my career, I went from selling it and implementing it to selling it, starting it, moving to selling it. And then that next step into just selling the software was different. But I think the one thing I have is I push the envelope in regards to the execution because I actually get involved with the partners now too.
Hmm.
And we didn't do a lot of that. We did some of it, and typically it was solution-based partners. It wasn't the implementation partners. But as we start to go through, one thing that I found, and this is going to be the same case irrespective of product, certification of consultants to do implementation of their products is a requirement. And you want the right person with the right skill set to basically be monitoring that, having that conversation with the client. Otherwise, the client doesn't get the knowledge they need to have to make the right decision.
Hmm.
And that's what I do. So I'm actually more involved now than I had been with numbers of steering committees and numbers of innovation sessions where we're actually going through that. And I can go at the end of the day and say, okay, hey, we have something that's now implementable. Here's my telephone number. If you have anything, any questions, let me know. I still have CIOs, CEOs that call me. I mean, I guarantee you, I leave my phone on, particularly at the end of the year. I may not be working on sales, but I've gotten, I don't know, 15, 20 calls of CIOs or CEOs having a problem on a go live that are going live January 1st. And they want to know, what can I do or what will I suggest or
Hmm.
those types of things. So it's still use. It's still a muscle I use. And it's not to say that the muscle's put away. Because one thing I've noticed at this point in time is as we start to look through this and the execution and SaaS and what's coming and what's going through, I've seen 5, 6 waves of technology. Seventh wave is coming. Um, it's really going to be down to how individuals can accomplish the things that need to be done to increase the innovation, execution, and impacts to their businesses. And the individuals that help that, let they be in sales, solutions, or implementations, or those individuals that are sought out.
Across your career, you've seen these different waves of change that you talked about, these different ways of technology, and we've definitely seen an increase in the speed of the way that change is just accelerating. Can you talk about some of those different shifts that you've seen across your career and kind of some of the ways that we could take lessons from that as we look at some of the future waves that are coming? AI being one of those big things that's jumping in and changing everything for us.
Well, I have sat on a couple of Harvard business panels this year and had a couple interesting conversations. And
Hmm.
actually, yeah, some of those recordings are still out there, and some of those recordings, this morning I'm driving to an appointment this morning, and I got a text on LinkedIn from an individual that was sitting in the audience to say, "I love your conversations in person. I love your conversations on LinkedIn. It's a lot better than anything that I've heard from
Hmm.
anybody, and it's actually got tangible, use cases." So I think the thing that I thought was interesting in that particular panel is I said, "Okay, how many know or have heard of blockchain?" Of course, in CIOs, everyone raised their hand. I said, "How effective was that?" And immediately everybody's covering their mouth and chuckling. I said, AI is going to be similar. It's the best thing. It's the bright, shiny thing. Everyone's going to use it. The question is going to be how and where. If you look at Gardner, you look at IDC, you look at Forrester, 90 plus, 90 to 95, 96% of the companies are using some form of AI in something today. You take that down to about 80% have something in development. You look about 20% have something in production. When you look at those statistics, that's great. It's out there, it's rampant. But then you ask the question, how many are you actually reducing cost or increasing to the bottom line with the use of that use case? And it's less than 10%. And I think that's doubled since the last time I looked at the numbers. So Gardner came back, I think, originally and said it was something like 94, 95% of the people did not get anything out of the value of the AI product that they were using. I think now it's down to 92 or 90. But long and short, it's still got some runway on it in regards to being able to use. And hallucinations are part of that. The use of it, how you implement it. It's not going to be a easy fix all.
Uh-huh.
It require that your data is clean and your data is usable. It's going to require that you open it up and you can go out the aperture outside of your organizations to do your comparisons, which means that your software probably needs to be available, online somewhere versus, in the back corner or in the back closet. So those are the kind of things that are interesting in this particular wave. But when you start looking at the waves I go back, I went from mainframe to client server, client server to relational, relational to, the execution of ERP, from custom to ERP. I mean, my first deal, and going back to that Oracle deal, was a custom piece of work.
Okay.
We spent 12 months, 13 months doing a design.
Wow.
We spent another 15 months doing development, another 18 months doing testing before we physically put it in. And that particular product was going to run all of the retail side of all the bases in the global structure. So the client was Army Air Force Exchange Services, or AFIS, and some of the first implementations were to kind of grow that out, and then I left from that point, but I had a couple of the first ones at Bliss and Fort Hood, and it was something people didn't realize. This is a green screen, and this is a client server GUI. From that, you moved into some of the mobile, the
Hmm.
RFI devices and the mobile. Again, best thing out there, too expensive. Hey, you get a chip, you put it on something, and it costs you 5 times the price of the product to put the chip on it than actually the product itself. Now, that chip is 2 cents. So at this
Hmm.
point in time, how you do it, where you do it, etc. Every single one of our dogs have got an air tag on 'em, so dog leaves the neighborhood. I know where the dog's at. So, at this point in time, there's a lot of things going through. So I think that was the next step. I think the thing after that really came down to, really now today, it's prim versus, a hosted type relationships, and the outsourcing and the hosting the hyperscalers. Then you have blockchain. Then you have this. I think the next wave is really the monetization of AI to really useful and productive pieces. And I hear a lot, hey, it's going to take over the world. Hey, it's going to destroy it. Terminator 1, Terminator 2, away from that. I mean, I use it on a daily basis to help me do things like write emails, answer things, go through a series of stuff to do a summarization to save me time. All those things are practical things. And if you think about that, most people, once they get to a certain level in life, don't do certain things. Once you start to go into home ownership and you start traveling, you may not do your lawn anymore. So you outsource that. So as
Hmm.
you start to think about that, did you outsource your maid service? All those things didn't take away jobs. They just allowed you to do more things. And
Hmm.
you weren't putting the time or the effort at a lower skilled type of task. You were doing other things. And so I see AI as that approach, and particularly for the next few years. It's really going to be down to, what can we do? How can it eliminate waste, time, and effort to allow people to take that skill and do something else with it? Yes, it does impact the lower levels based upon the manual, repeating. But in general, if you were going to outsource your AR or your AP practice to a BPO, what are they doing? They're putting people in the back room, and they're basically doing that stuff by hand. What happens if you were able to take that group and do 15 companies versus one?
Yeah.
So again, you got to think about how the application is happening. And then once the application's happening, how can you then go through it? So I think it's great that a new tool comes out. I mean, if you're a car guy, I'm a car guy. Okay. A new thing comes out on the car. I got to look at it. I got to drive it. I got to see what it's going to do. When it becomes a needed or wanted item is when you then go out and buy it. And that's really where you're going to see AI come in. And that is when you start to see the need, the want, the execution that basically is going to drive that value. That's when you see it's going to move over. And it's really, you look at the people who sell and you look at the people that implement, it's keeping up with that ongoing learning experience to have that conversation with the customer that really is going to drive the success of those individuals. Let it be in implementation or let it be in sales.
So when we think about, companies making this change, we've talked about some of the different ways that they solve problems differently, and some of the different technologies that they've used with this. Where do you see companies failing in their execution to not just throw technology at it, but really, as you said, dig a little bit deeper and make sure what we're doing is adding value and we can answer the why we're doing this and what this impact is versus we're just doing it. Because I see a lot of companies when we're talking and they want to do AI and it's like they're so quick to solve the problem, they're maybe not making the best decision of how they're solving it or why they're solving it.
You can pick up the newspaper now, and that dates me. You can pick up the news off the ads. You can pick up the news off your internet. You see this thing coming up more and more. You see, what's going on, who's doing what, how they're actually executing, where they're going to do, what the failure might have been, etc.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of this is coming down to, is execution and implementation in parallel structures? Because I had a conversation at the beginning of the year with a consulting firm who implements and consults putting our product into customers. They themselves went through their implementation. And we were having a big, long conversation about AI and AI use. And in that conversation, I asked them, well, what did you do about this and this and this as far as the configuration goes? And they were having a problem having the AI do cache
Mhm.
out for them. Well, they had set cache out to a tolerance of 0. So it didn't make a difference what AI did. It didn't find anything because everything was a difference. So
Mhm.
you have to make sure that all the systems are working together, all the data is working together to be able to use it. So one of the things I found interesting, particularly the Orlando Harvard review that occurred now 3 weeks ago, is one of the things I said on stage is, if someone's walking into your office talking about blue sky on AI, make sure that they turn around pretty quickly and they hit the door. 2 reasons. One, there are use cases out there. Code is developed and you can implement stuff immediately. You don't
Mhm.
have to go code through this design process and build it. And if someone's coming in trying to teach that to you or sell that to you, they don't have it. They're trying to basically do it on the back of whatever they're trying to sell. So long and short, make sure that when you're having those conversations, that it's executable and they physically have it, because everyone's throwing it out there. I mean, I think Gardner's last report said something like $3 billion this year alone in regards to AI development. And if you talk about 90% of that not having a financial implementation to it, well, for 3 billion, that's 2.7 billion that could be used for something else.
Mhm.
Well, I guarantee you the CFO is going to be taking note into that, and whether or not the COO, the CRO, and the CIO are impacting upon that, the CFO is going to have some say about it. So, question becomes, using the technology for the right way to implement, to improve, to optimize is the best approach to it, irrespective of what the function happens to be. And again, going back to the car analogy, you know, crawl. And one of the new things on a couple of the trucks and the SUVs is the crawl function. Well, crawl is not the same in every single vehicle. Crawl in one of them allows for the car to move sideways and then basically go through
Wow.
it. Well, the other one moves the car up and down. Well, this is up and down. This is still moving forward. Different functions called the same thing. So as you start to think through it, is how can I take the technology? How can I put the business problem? How can I put them together? And where do I actually see that result? Bottom line or top line?
And when you see companies doing things right, what are some of the things that they're doing as they're building out their strategy with this? They're making sure it's tying to value and hitting the financial bottom line. What are some of the steps, if you were to give a cheat sheet of doing this right, that you would be suggesting?
I think a lot of it is early, fast pilots that fail. So you learn very quickly what works and what doesn't. You learn very quickly how big or how small the use case needs to be.
Mhm.
You learn very quickly how long it needs to take and how long it's going to basically, need as far as the number of people and the approvals, etc. So it's not go in the back room and spend the next year doing it and come back and do some big product release. These are incremental, small, agile approaches to these use cases. So the question becomes, how fast can you basically get the requirements in, look
Mhm.
at them, code them, and implement them and see the results, and then repeat, improve, and go after the next one. And when you start to see things like design structures that are 2 weeks or 4 weeks in regards to these apps, then they are in a production scenario where they're actually getting the value out of those books. So I think the long piece of it is if someone's got that approach and they've kind of productionized that approach through, I wouldn't call it a assembly line, but the assembly approach to it, and they've worked out those kinks, understand that they can quickly determine those requirements into the funnel. They can determine what's high, what's low, what's
Mhm.
first, what's second. You quickly then start to go through that process, and as those things come out, you're going to see more and more people come knocking on the door. I think those are the companies that are actually doing really well. The companies that aren't are the companies that are basically building this big, huge department, putting a big, huge piece about it. And once you get all that, now we're going to go do our work. So now you spend all this people growing all this stuff, doing all this stuff, and they come back and they produce one app for the year. You got a problem. So I think, some of it's skunk work, some of it needs to be still, contextualized in regards to the IT and go through the production process. But in general, it's an agile approach. Like agile has been out there for a while. The methodology and use of it is in AI is definitely there because most of these applications, most of these use cases, once you have a base core, are weeks, if not faster.
Yeah. Well, what you're really talking about is building the bridge as you're crossing it, to make sure that it's constantly growing, constantly adapting, changing the direction as we need to, and being impactful quickly. So you've talked about a lot of ways, you embody your own leadership philosophy and a lot of leaders that you've worked with. If you think about your course of your career, how are you seeing, leadership changing, the C-suite changing, how they're anticipating change and adapting and leading differently in this different climate?
Well, I'll answer that question in two parts. The first part is I will talk about the change in the C-suite, and the second I'll talk about how they're dealing with it. Because I think the C-suite, particularly across most organizations, and ours is no different, is becoming younger. So it's more of high, fast development of resources who are younger and earlier in their careers. So it's the ability to take those, mold those individuals in such that they did a great job to get to where they're at, and they're
Hmm.
continuing to look, learn, adapt, and grow, as compared to I got there and I'm done. I made it, and I'm coasting the rest of my life. Because it's an ongoing piece. It's just like winning the Super Bowl. You go out there the one year, you win it. Next year it starts over and everyone's equal again. So as a position, are you going to do that? The C-suites that basically have taken that, adopted that, put that together, and executed with a governance enough to satisfy the organization with enough governance over the execution, but allowing the team to do what they need to go do are those
Hmm.
that are basically doing well. The C-suite that is not doing that, or the C-suite that is waiting to be second, last in regards to this, we're going to let everybody else do it first and then we'll figure it out. Those are the ones that are probably going to have problems as we move forward. And those organizations are probably going to have problems because they're not going to receive some of those impacts and revenue and bottom line, top line growth that they're looking for as compared to others. But I think it's no different. At this point in time, if you want to look at companies 50 years ago, automation. The companies that basically started automating were the companies and putting IT in were the companies that basically, were starting to hit high revenue growth.
Hmm.
Those are you take that as an example, you apply it today, it's going to be pretty much the same. It hasn't really changed too much in regards to success. There still is a first mover, there still is a second mover, and there's still the laggards. And the organizations that move quickly have to fail fast and win quick to be successful to keep their legs up. And whether or not that's age or not, an experience, it's the ability to basically pick that up and do something with it.
Fail fast, win quick. Love that. I
Yep.
put post-it notes up on my monitor of things I want to remember. That one's going up there. That's a great philosophy there, Tom. When you are having these different conversations with C-suites, I know you've talked about different panels that you've been a part of talking about some of these different future topics. What are some of the things that you see as top of mind of challenges that they're trying to solve for, that they're bringing to you and you're hearing in these conversations?
I think resources is definitely, top five. How do you attract and retain resources to do this work? It is a pretty different approach. I mean, Python and other languages are a bit different. If they've
Mhm.
coded in Cobalt, then you got a big jump to get to Python. If you coded in C or C++, that's one thing. But if you start to look at some of these things, and you look at some of these organizations that are not just IT, they're selling something or producing a product, the mindset's changed. People to do resources are now resourcing in different parts. Prime example, I saw an ad yesterday from one of my large consulting customers who was advertising to hire directly in Columbus, South Carolina for 0 to 2 year experienced individuals to
Mhm.
live, work 5 days a week in the office in that location. So those
Okay.
individuals who are inbox, those individuals who are mountaineers, prime way of going to do it. But if you look at everything else, it may not work for everyone else. So I think the resource is in that top five. I think the second thing of this is that mindset of risk and reward. Obviously that's going to be a big part of it, because a lot of them are, hey, I've had 15 people this week that talked to me, and none of them had a product, and I don't know what to do. And um, that inability of, we're sitting there in the mud and people are going by me, is really part of that. And so you see this, if I don't do something, something's going to have a problem. So don't lose your patience for the ability of keeping up with the Joneses. The third one is, everyone's trying to get through all those use cases to determine what is best and what does. So
Yeah.
everyone's looking for, hey, this use case produced this result and it was done in this period of time frame. Hey, that makes sense. I have that same problem. I can go do the same thing. So the ability to have a conversation, correlate, and go through it were prime pieces in regards to, hey, what is my peers doing? How have they succeeded? How have they been had problems, and how can I correct that? Third piece is money, but I haven't seen that as being a problem. And everything they're seeing, I mean, I've seen more money spent on AI right now than I've seen spent on other applications. So people are spending money. The question is going to be the result and the outcome of that money. And I think fourth is leadership. Or fourth, fifth, whatever, whichever number that is. But I think leadership's part of that. I think the leadership of the team, the leadership of the organization, how you go after that use case
Mhm.
execution, the ability of governing the team, and giving them that ability to have enough length to fail and to react, being able to look at talent, understand talent, retain talent, bring talent in.
Mhm.
All is that it's gonna come down to leadership. I mean, individuals stay in jobs because they like their boss and they like what they're doing. Individuals typically leave a position because they don't like the boss. They're quitting their boss, they're not quitting their job. And so, leadership is obviously created to that. I think that there's also kind of an underlying shadow answer to this, and that is, a lot of these C-suite individuals don't want to be wrong
Mm.
and don't want to be embarrassed and don't
Mhm.
want to open up to do either of those two in public. So what I have found through these three panels over the course of this year is, I'll get up, I'll have a few questions, I have a lot of conversations with the panel, we get off, and then I got this line wanting to go through individual examples that they want to do in private, because either it's quote quote competitive, or they don't want to bring up their dirty laundry and mix company. So long and short, I think leadership's got to be able to understand that also. But I think the underlying piece of it is, everyone's learning
Mhm.
and everyone's reacting, and there might be a case to basically be successful, but that case is individualized by company and individualized by person. And some of them might be tools you don't need, and some of them might be tools that you do need. So it's one of those things that not everything's going to be a one silver bullet. It's gonna have to take the individual conversations and the individual companies to go through it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of conversation. I mean, I guarantee it. At this point in time, it's one thing that's been interesting is, typically I'll walk out of those day events and I've got to sit down and relax and just unwind for a good 30, 45 minutes because of the amount of questions I get, because there's no longer the stump the chump conversations. It's, hey, I need you to come do this and solve this problem for me.
talked about the ways that, customers have been solving problems differently and the technology that they've used, the leadership styles that they bring to this. But that sales experience, over my career, I've seen it go from here's functionally what we need to do. Can you check these boxes? Can you do it? To becoming a much more educated buyer, where the customer's coming, knowing a lot more about you, to now where, we're not only having really a experience based on what's the customer experience need to be and how are we weighing all of this, but how are we, you know, delighting them and impressing them with something very new and different. What are some of the ways that you've seen across your career that sales experience change and what do you see coming next?
Well, I think the sales teams that are successful are those that are personable in sales in general, but it be dishwashers, cars, projects, houses, you name it. People buy more and better from people they like.
Hmm.
They don't buy as much or they don't buy at all for people they don't like. So, as a sales professional, and as you grow and learn and are able to adapt in your career, how are your interpersonal skills and how are your ability to have those conversations um, going to help you? So, I think a lot of those go down to really the adaptation, not being too rigid is probably one of them. I think second is just never say no. You can say a lot of things. You know my saying in regards to the art of consulting. I won't do it so we don't have to record it. But the client's going to have an opinion, and that opinion may not be yours. That opinion may not be to buy your product. So the question then becomes, what do you need to go do to entice him to at least open up to have a fruitful, equal conversation in regards to that? And usually that's going to be personality and execution. And if it's not, then you haven't brought the right things to the conversation. If they come back, so well, I'm not interested, I'm not buying. Well, Joe down the street, who is your peer, does the following things, did this last year, and this was the results. If that's not important to you, that's fine. I mean, I can go away and
Hmm.
you can go talk to Joe. Here's my number. So when you go to talk to Joe and Joe, explains what he did, call me. So I've taken that different approach that it's and this as well. I like analogies. It's the taking the horse to water. You can't make them drink. They got to look at the water. They got to like the water, and then they got to drink. But at this point in time, you got to get them in the water first. So I think a lot of it is making sure you're getting that second call, making sure you're getting that second meeting, making sure you're getting that second call. You're having the conversation
Hmm.
and being as personable as possible. And some of that, just the act of being truthful and black and white is part of that. And everyone doesn't like constructive criticism, but everyone who gets constructive criticism that basically understands it
Hmm.
um, appreciates. And so the question becomes, how you tell that to the client, how you tell that to the customer. Hey, this is probably not the best approach. Or you got it. You don't need me. I thank you very much. You're good. When
Hmm.
something else changes, let me know. Or hey, I don't really agree with you, but I understand your point. If you do need something in the future, give me a call. Those are the pieces. So I think and then the other thing I think that's also interesting, and this is something I say to a lot of the individuals coming out of the academy. Don't take no as an answer. No might be no now, but if you're always turning that no into something, then you've got the art of sale down. So it's no, I'm not interested. Well, if you're not interested now today, why? Let me understand. You made that purchase last year. You're still implementing. Great, got it. Check. Off I go. No, I don't like you. Okay, I'll get somebody else in here. Let's come out. Let's put Katie in, and let's have this conversation again. No, I'm going to retire in a year. Well, nothing's going to happen in a year because they don't want to basically have a rough time for the year. So let's go back next year after retirement, start talking to the new person. So it's the understanding of that. And long and short, it comes down to it's personal relationship. Selling is a personal conversation.
Hmm.
Two people having a conversation. There might be people supporting either of those two people, but in that conversation, let it be your spouse, let it be your kids, let it be your client. It's a two-person conversation and a two-person interaction. At the end of the day, those two people have to like each other. Those two people have to agree, and off you go. And if they don't agree, and meaningful, they should come across as respectful to each other and move forth.
Mhm.
That's separate. That's separate. But it's just that. I mean, someone in a business meeting isn't doing this, and this is not oh really that's not a relationship. That's not productive. I understand there's important things. I understand that thing is tethered to everybody's belt, but it's the relationship, it's the conversation. Put the effort into that while you're sitting in front of them, to be successful. But I think if you take those three pieces, and I think the last of the piece I'd add to that would be training, keeping up with your training. Make sure you understand what you're doing. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure you've learned. Make sure you're trained.
Mhm.
Make sure you have done everything you can to do what's right by that conversation in the conversation at the time it's being asked. And that might be product knowledge, that might be peer knowledge, that might be what they're doing, it might be what somebody else is doing, it might be what the financials are going, it might be what the economy's doing, but how can that impact them and what that conversation might be. All of those things are going to be interesting for that individual in that conversation. So, long and short, I think it's the nice piece about it is that AI hasn't taken that over.
It's a beautiful package of what you talk about of what we do in sales with emotional intelligence, bringing a point of view of adding something of value, having learned and came in prepared, having candor and being able to be direct and be able to be an effective communicator, and really looking at when we have a challenge, how do we overcome that? What do we take that we've learned here and do something with it? I love, and I wrote down again, another post-it note for my desk. How are you turning a no into something? That is really, really a great thing for us to take away as we're thinking about challenges with trying to fail quickly with AI and learn, or how are we looking at turning around a sales cycle of things that aren't going well and doing something different about it. When we think about learning, you shared a lot of different things that you are seeing. What are some of the ways that you focus on learning and really kind of continuing to stay sharp through all of these different evolutions across technology and trends and ways to be working differently? What would you suggest to our listeners out there?
I suggest make time for yourself on a daily basis. Okay. So you make time for yourself when you have a cup of coffee, you're sitting, you're relaxing. You make time for sitting down with your kids to play cards or trains or cars or whatever. Make time for yourself. Put it on your calendar. You know, 45 minutes, an hour. Doesn't have to be daily, but at least once a week. I personally, I block off things. So I know every morning I get up, I have my coffee, I go through my emails, I through everything that's out there. Well, I've got something that pops up that's a learning that is required for me. I'll go do it, whether
Mhm.
it's due now or it's due at the end of the year. I'll do it at that point in time. It's done. Don't procrastinate in regards to that. Procrastination at this point in time is one of the things that will kill that. But the learning piece has to be an active memory muscle that you continue to use.
Mhm.
Second piece of that is once that's aside, then the next question becomes, how did you study? And some of this goes back to individuals in college. If you were the type of individual that basically crammed the night before and took the test, how successful were you doing that? If you're great successful doing that, keep doing it. You're, 10%, 15% of everybody else. Everybody else's procrastination basically turns them into not exactly being successful. So make sure that at this point in time that you're doing it when you need to go to do it. And then lastly is, and I say this all the time to everyone I talk with, there's two ways to stop learning. You become unrelatable or irrelevant,
Mm.
or you find yourself in a pine box. Those should be the only two reasons that you stop learning. There's a reason you have something between your ears. There's a reason why you basically go through it. There's a reason why you like music. There's a reason why you like reading. You have a mind. That mind needs to be exercised. It is a muscle like anything else in your body. Doesn't qualify as a muscle, but is something that basically does it. And we use only about 16, 18% of our brain. What's the other 82% going to go do? Going back to AI. If I can take those 18% that basically is manual, and I can take and put the stuff that I don't have to worry about, and I can concentrate on growing that at 3 or 4, 5% of the brain capacity. Guess what? AI is productive. AI is got monetary impacts to
Mhm.
it. But again, it's learning. And it's learning for a purpose. So so for business learning, business is learning for a purpose. What are you trying to get out of this particular learning? You're trying to gain a skill, adapt a tool, understand something. add some credibility to a conversation, etc. Learning on a personal side doesn't have to have that. It could just be for the art of relaxation, the art of
Enjoyment.
whatever.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I mean, people go to museums, people go out and walk the nature trail. That's all learning. They're all seeing what's going on in front of them, etc. There's just a I'm gonna relax. That's what I'm gonna learn. But if you got a purpose, you got a need, and you got something else going on, the business learning is got to have a purpose to it.
Mm,
Short term, long term, but a purpose.
mm. Purpose-built learning. So, as we wrap up here, any final advice that you'd like to share, Tom?
Well, I appreciate everything that you did when you were here, and I've seen a lot of these podcasts as you've put them out, and I really applaud the ingenuity and the innovation this has actually brought. As far as parting thoughts go, I'd say people keep your eyes up, keep your learning on, and keep and don't ask, and get an answer of no. Keep going. And that lastly, if something is not working, then question is re-look at the aspect of the problem and readjust your angle and go after it again.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks again so much, Tom. Tremendously valuable. I always enjoy our conversations and your candor.
Thanks.